What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Why We Love PlayStation VR. Sitting across from me this week and every week, he impales merchants in their sleep. It's Desra.
Entirely consensually.
Is that yeah? Is that for real?
Yeah.
Okay.
And sitting across from me, of course, is Brian Paul.
And every week on Why We Love PlayStation VR, we dip into the PSVR archive. We pull out a game at random. That's very, very untrue. This show would be awful if it was just random.
I don't know. There might be a certain charm.
Maybe. We dust the blow off of it, and we take a nice long look at it and let you know if it's worth your time. It's been given any love by developers, any DLC, any updates, and then we let you know if it's worth your time. I feel like I said that out of order.
Yeah, but still, it works.
That being said, what game did we decide to play this week, Desra?
This week, we decided to play Table of Tales.
Table of Tales, The Crooked Crown.
The Crooked Crown, that's true.
By Tin Man Games, released April 16th, 2019.
All the way back then.
1999.
Yes. Well, I think, wasn't it on sale for PS Plus a little bit?
I know there was a launch or pre-order sale.
Okay.
Or maybe launch week sale.
Yeah.
20% off.
Right. Yes.
Which is a decent percent off
Not you
for a $20 game.
Yeah.
What kind of game is Table of Tales: The Crooked Crown?
It's pretty much, it's a tabletop RPG simulator, honestly. Yeah.
It is. Is it pirate themed?
It is pirate themed.
You have
Mystical, fantastical, magical pirates.
Yes. And the thing, it's very. It reminds me of No Heroes Allowed.
Oh no! Don't say that.
Well, because you're in one room the entire time.
Yes.
And you're looking at one table the entire time.
Yes.
And everything you do is on that table.
Yes.
The table changes.
The table changes.
The room doesn't change.
Beautiful, amazingly interesting ways.
Yeah, let's talk about this table because it might be the craziest, most awesome table of all time.
Yeah, so like your typical, I mean, your Warhammer and many like tabletop games, the world is divided into like hex squares, like six-sided, figures, and you move different hexes. This stays to your typical cubes, your typical squares, but the table surface is made up of all these square pieces that kind of are attached to sort of pegs and kind of like drop in and out in this really beautiful, really fluidly animated animation. So it's like the game board you always kind of like hoped that magically would happen someday. It's a magical game board that kind of looks like technology. It's beautiful.
You know what it reminds me of?
What's that?
Remember when Microsoft showed off HoloLens with Minecraft?
Yep.
It reminds me of that so much.
Yeah.
And the great thing is like there are all these tiles that are like falling off over here and then raising up over here to give the illusion of scrolling, of something moving across the world.
And a lot of the action happens on a ship or a bunch of different ships, but the ship doesn't move through the world. The ship stays stationary and the world moves past it. And it's, again, a very cool concept.
It's hard to ignore the graphics in this because it is. Because at the beginning of the game, they're like, "Hey, pick up this key and unlock this." I think your aunt left you this.
Yes, your aunt left you this magical table,
right?
And you're like, "Okay, what's the deal with this?" I mean, it starts like basically every other kind of mystery, unlock the room sort of thing. You find a key and you unlock it.
It's Jumanji.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it turns out it's a game. It's a board game, but it's so much more.
And flying around this board game,
yes,
is your dungeon master or game master,
Arbitrix.
Arbitrix. Mm-hmm. What the heck does Arbitrix mean?
Well, Arbiter is someone who
I asked the right person.
Yeah. It's basically someone who is in charge of the rules, like an arbiter, a judge. Mm-hmm. And of course, the trix is an archaic way to feminize something. So,
yep. Excellent.
So like a dominator and a dominatrix.
Oh, it's all coming together. Yeah. But it's just kind of a mechanical bird.
Yeah, very, very magical, mechanical.
The kind of British accent.
Yeah, a very like farmy kind of British accent, like a very kind of like, it's not like this big mystical like upper crust, stuffy London accent. It's like a little. I'm not going to say Cockney because people way overuse that, and it's not Cockney, but it's kind of like it's like a farmer accent. It's kind of cool. Yeah.
And what's great about this is it's like in typical, and I'm saying this not with any firsthand knowledge of it, but in typical Dungeons and Dragons format with a game master, this bird is voicing all of the characters in the game.
Yeah. It does have, it smacks of Moss a little bit. Which is
true.
Which is what some people found annoying. I found absolutely charming about it.
Very charming.
Because it's Moss was a storybook. It's someone reading you a story. Get over yourselves. But this
You're
is
so mean to people during the show.
Well, no, it's I mean, like, if you have a valid criticism, that's fine. If you were playing Call of Duty and there was someone doing that, yes, you're right. You
Call of Duty Fairy Book Edition.
Right.
You can use that.
But when the entire framing device it's a fairy tale that someone is reading to you, you can't be upset when someone is reading it to you.
Right.
And those same people are going to be complaining about Arbitrix.
Now I just said that I have zero history with D&D.
Yes.
And that's unfortunate. Like,
it is.
Even growing up, my friends in junior high, like, we were into Monty Python and all sorts of, like, in comic books, anime, and all sorts of stuff that sort of just goes hand in hand.
Tonight, my kids and I just watched Holy Grail for the first time.
Wow.
I mean, I've seen it plenty.
I know. Yes, we know that you've seen it hundreds of times.
When is...
how did it go over?
I'm very proud.
Nice.
Yes.
That's great.
Okay, moving on.
Litterbox episode. But you've got definitely a history with D&D.
Yeah, no, I was that guy in high school. Me and my friends Ben and Gary. There is absolutely no way either of you are watching this now, but if you are, hi guys.
Yeah. Hope you're enjoying your PSVR headsets, Ben and Jerry.
Awesome. Well, so Ben actually works for Microsoft. I know that, and he's worked on some Microsoft games.
Hope you're enjoying your HoloLens.
Yeah. But yeah, so we played AD&D. Actually, we played the Dark Sun expansion. I guess that's the term for it now, expansions. But Dark Sun was the whole world and rule set. Heroes Unlimited, which is a Palladium game, kind of based off the Rift engine. Yeah, lots of paper and graphing paper and pencils and dice.
Okay, so now that we've established where we both fall in the D&D universe, you're going to be able to judge this game as a tabletop D&D game when it comes to you scoring it.
Yeah, I do have some credentials there. I mean, I was not the super miniatures guy, which is kind of important. Like, this is really trying to recapture that specific sort of tabletop role-playing game where you have the intricate miniatures that you're moving around physically in the space. But I can absolutely see where they were going, what they were trying to capture.
Yes.
One thing I do is we kind of like, usually we talk a little about the developer and then talking to the game. We kind of just we're so excited about graphically how it was. We skipped that, which is interesting because like graphically it is so beautiful, and the animation design, I can't stress how amazing that is. What's even crazier is this is a publisher who has never done a VR game before, who has never done a traditional video game before.
What kind of stuff is Tin Man Games done?
They've done what they call game book adventures.
I saw this on their site.
Yes.
But I didn't delve deeper. I figured you could cover this.
Yeah, so a game book adventure, and I don't know that they created this genre necessarily, but they're definitely the biggest name in it. It's basically a mashup of choose your own adventure
I know that.
and a role-playing game.
Kind of know that.
That you play on your tablet, your phone, whatever. So you're basically reading the story, and you get up to moments in the story where you get to make a choice. But it's not just like choose this and go to page whatever. There's also, your character has stats. There's a free one that is a pirate-based story, coincidentally. And, one of the first interactions you have is you come up with 3 pirates in the alleyway, and you can choose to try and fight them or run away. If you want to run away, you've got to roll to see if you're lucky enough to run away. If you want to fight them, you've got to roll to see if your attack works. They roll against you.
It's all starting to make sense.
Yeah, exactly. It is definitely like, this is absolutely the next step in their progression of like, all right, we want to, we're going to use reading and tablets to give you a sense of the tabletop adventure. Now we're going to use VR to really drive that home.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. I still don't I don't know how you go from text-based stories to we've seen many games. I'm sorry, I'm kind of want to
cool.
here. We've seen many games from developers like, we know games and we've done games forever and now we're going to do a VR game and it looks like shit. And this is a game from a developer who has never done a 3D game, or a game really with a lot of graphics. And well, actually, that's not entirely true. Warlock, Firetop. Point being, they knocked it out of the park as far as visually. I don't want to get to my ratings too soon, but
so there's a little bit something here where I could tell almost immediately that these guys were not PSVR veterans, at least video game veterans.
Yeah.
Because the first thing you do is you can grab a Move controller. You can play with one or two, or the DualShock 4.
Yes.
Something in PlayStation VR that is wildly different than like PlayStation 3 moves is just how one-to-one and so accurate and so fluid and just seamless everything feels.
Yeah.
In Table of Tales, it's one of the very few games where I go, why isn't this quite like it doesn't seem to be, it's moving one-to-one.
Yeah.
But it feels like somehow the controller's running at a lower frame rate or something, and it just seems off. You know, I have the aim controller in Farpoint, and I'm like, this is doing exactly the thing. And in this, I'm like, oh, it's just like it not stutters or something. Even there's something a little off about the controls. They work fine, but it was something that I noticed right away, and it never went away for the entire game.
That's interesting. And so here's something else I noticed, because right before we filmed this, I played it a little bit on Brian's, because we there's something we wanted to try, and also I like to try to compare OG versus graphically. There was no difference that I could tell.
Okay,
but
well, that's good to hear.
Interestingly enough, I had zero problems with actually the motion. There was some placing objects where you want them to was a little wonky, but actually as far as it was exactly what I thought it would. I noticed no stuttering, no anything. So
perfect.
That might be a weird hardware issue.
It could be anything.
Yeah, I don't know.
But what I will
maybe
say,
it's optimized for the OG.
It's also optimized for a Move controller. The game even tells you if you try to start it with a DualShock 4, it says, "Hey, this is meant to be played with a motion controller. Do you still want to play?" It literally says, "Do you still want?" I was like, "Yeah, I got to try this thing out for review." Sorry.
Yeah.
And so when you start it with a Move controller, it does what I love. I think Torn actually did this really well, but it shows you a kind of a Move controller.
Yeah.
But modified.
Yes.
This is a magic wand basically in this game, and it's the same size as a Move controller, and it's got a ball at the end of it like a Move controller, but it's magical.
And you can extend it like a Move controller.
Holding a Move button down, it just kind of shoots out the tip of it. This sounds weird. God, can we start this over?
No other way to go. No. That's it.
But it's basically. It reminds me a little of like I Expect You to Die, where they were like, you know what, we don't want people screwing up, like having to worry about tracking issues.
Yeah.
You know, Shell Games knew very well that there are only so far you can move with a controller until the game goes, what are you trying to do? We have no idea.
Yeah.
And Tin Man Games knows the same thing. And so rather than having to reach out all the way or reach all the way over here, you just hold the Move button down. And your controller basically extends. You can just kind of grab it nice and easy.
See, I guess, so you've got a more charitable view of it. I was just thinking like, oh, I can just be a lazy ass and sit back here.
Also true.
Right?
Both are true.
Yeah, instead of having to like lean forward the few times after reach, I was like, oh, I can just extend the tip and go ahead and grab it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
How irritating would it be if you're like, I have to reach this thing right here and it's just out of the tracking range and the controller stops here.
Yeah.
It would be so irritating.
But I would say, I mean, that's really not going to happen that often because the virtual table space isn't that large anyways. And there are very few times where there's something you really need to interact with that's all the way over there.
I'm just, I try to keep things like this in mind because the number of times we see people who have small play areas. And when I say small, I have a small play area.
Yes, you do.
Some people are talking like they have it even smaller, like they just have no room to move at all. They can't even reach forward. Everything's compact. Yeah. So you shouldn't have any problem with this game at all.
No.
That being said, don't use the DualShock 4. Here's the thing: the DualShock 4 in game looks just like the Move Magic Wand. So they really were like, please don't use the DualShock 4 if you don't have to. And it uses the light bar still for tracking. So it's messy. And if you don't have your camera down, like basically at waist level.
Oh, okay.
Then the second you try to move the DualShock 4 down, lose tracking.
Okay.
And so I don't know. I mean, if you've played Moss with DualShock 4 and you played along together with a DualShock 4 and you were able to move the camera down, fine. I'm saying if you have the option, use a Move controller or use two Move controllers. It's way better. Yeah. Moving on. We haven't even talked about what this game's actually about, though.
So yeah, you're basically you start out as one of four. Well, I mean, you are controlling a party of 4 scoundrels.
Yeah, they call them scoundrels.
They call them that through the whole game.
Sounds like they've got horrible reputations. They've all come from horrible pasts.
Reputation.
and these are things you kind of like learn throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, what's interesting about it is it does really capture the spirit of a role-playing game in that, like, the story goes along at a certain pace until it comes time for a decision. Like something you need to decide, are you going to talk to this person about that? Are you going to go here instead of there? And then the story branches off from there, which is definitely where you can see the DNA from their game books or their game book adventures. And so you don't get the whole story behind all the characters all at once. And in fact, actually, very early on, you're forced to decide which one of your 4 characters is going to die.
Yeah, it's not a spoiler to say because it's like super early on.
Yeah.
But yeah, the game often asks you to make decisions, and there are no wrong answers. You can go this way, you can go that way. You can like go steal a ship, or you can go back to your own ship that's heavily guarded.
Right.
And it's just like and so they're branching paths, but for the most part they're subtly branching paths. I don't think they really stretch really far out without coming back together fairly soon, except for this major decision they force you to make right off the bat, where you meet all your characters, and you survive a mutiny, and then you're going through all these like terrible seas, like these terrible waters, and waves are crashing overboard, and the game says, all right, one of your characters just totally fell overboard.
And which is really interesting because you start out with what's traditionally a well-balanced party. You've got your spellcaster, you got your tank, you've got your support, and you've got your bard, thiefy sort of, nimble guy.
Yeah.
And you've got to choose, okay, I'm going to lose one of these.
And so right off the bat, they're saying, here's a decision you have to make, and you don't even realize right away that pretty much throughout the course of this game, you're going to learn about each character's past by going to their homeworld. So suddenly, you've made a decision that influences the entire rest of the game. Right. I think you'd have to play this game a couple times to see everything. Right.
And not only that, I mean, there is a basic like story structure that kind of stays the same, but even in that, you can make choices. There are NPCs that can kind of join your party and help you for a little bit, and depending on how well you, like, let's say, if you're like me, you're like, oh, it's an NPC, they're going to live. Right, because it's part of the story. Like, nope, they just died. And, but if I had taken better care of that NPC, turns out on another playthrough, they actually went through and fought and made what was a very, very difficult level much easier. Yeah. So your choices, I don't want to say it's like you make a choice and the game says, all right, we don't care about your choice you made. We're going to go back to do this anyways. There are these story beats you're going to kind of hit no matter what.
Right.
But the way you get to those beats can be very, very different on the different playthroughs.
Yeah. Now, you did say that you start off with a traditionally well-balanced party.
Yes.
There's like 8 attributes, right, total, that kind of play into that?
Well, there's skill, intelligence,
I got them all
power.
down here.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Health, defense, power, and move.
Yes.
And then strength, finesse, intellect, and charm.
Right. So the strength, finesse, intellect, and charm are your typical, like what you would be on your character sheet.
Okay.
In D&D. Like those are your player characteristics. And, each of them has a star rating based on that. And then your spells and, your opponent's spells and things can affect the health, defense, move, and power.
Got it.
Right.
But these are all things that throughout the course of the game, depending on the characters you're left with, there are moments, and this is going to be a tough part of the conversation.
Yeah,
being unfamiliar with D&D, but being very familiar with like JRPGs. This is sort of where I get a little bit conflicted about my feelings as this about this game as an RPG.
Yeah,
because if you're looking at this from like a JRPG's perspective, it's going to feel very limited in terms of your abilities and your upgrade potential. There's no XP bar. It's just there are moments in the game that the game goes, okay, now go upgrade your character. And you go and you go to the chest or the treasure chest, or you talk to the person, and you're allowed to upgrade a specific ability.
Yes.
Or a specific attribute. And then they say, okay, well, you can also get an extra card or something like that for your character. It just seems very limited, and because it's done at specific moments, it seems extra limited. It's like there's no grinding in this game. You can't just go do another battle because you felt like it. This next part was too hard. I'm going to go back and kill a bunch of little things out in the field.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was curious. I couldn't wait to ask you about this.
Yeah.
Because is this something that's very tabletop RPG like?
Very much so. So in a tabletop RPG, and again, I haven't played I don't know about 5th edition rules and things like that, but traditionally you play through a story or you play through a scenario, and then at the end you rewarded experience points or things like that.
Okay.
So you do this story with what you got.
Okay.
And then at the end you're awarded points and things like that. And then if you were a major spellcaster, then you can level up and then learn a new spell or things like that.
Gotcha.
And your spells, even then, are very limited. Like, Magic Missile, you can only use twice a day or whatever. I'm just pulling these out of my head. I didn't do any research on specific things like that.
We're getting kind of deep into this too. I apologize.
But I think it's important to do that with this, because I do. This is definitely we need to manage expectations. It's interesting if you go through history of video games. A lot of the early video games, you go your graphical, your MUDs, your multi-user dungeons.
I nodded like I knew what that was.
Oh man, that's Zork, right?
Zork? I know Zork.
Yeah, Zork.
Oh, okay.
Basically, what you had was programmers trying to recreate tabletop role-playing games in computers.
Gotcha.
Okay, but then what happened was developers found out, we can make this whole other thing. We're still going to call it a role-playing game, but it's nothing like those pen and paper stuff. Then you've got your Dragon Warriors, your Final Fantasy, then your JRPGs. Take off of that. Right. But they're as similar to Dungeons and Dragons as Bugatti is to a Model T. That's awful, because that's gonna make it sound like they're. But they started with the same DNA, but they completely went in their own directions.
Totally gotcha.
So bring it back to the point I was making. This is an attempt to go back to that original feeling. Okay, it's like, yes, we understand what you think of when you think of RPG, but we want to capture what that tabletop feeling was.
Nice. So a lot of what's happening here, I feel like maybe in case this is totally foreign to everybody, a lot of what's happening here is you're watching stories play out. There's a lot of, you call them cutscenes, I guess, where you just listening to the story, listening to the bird Arbitrix talk and deliver the story and do the voices, and then it's like, okay, here's kind of your next scenario. Here's your next battle situation where things start happening, and you have to pick up your character. You have, I'd say, action points.
Yes, action points. So, and this is another. There's a lot of just turn-based games in general which have this. You have a certain amount of action points you can use, and you can use that to either move through the field of battle or to not necessarily cast your spells, but use your action cards. And the way you use that is by picking up a card off of your Mercury and kind of dropping it over your character and hopefully hitting them.
It gets a little bit wonky every so often.
Yes.
It's something I have a hard time even complaining about, because it sort of all works so well.
It does.
That sometimes when it's so finicky, you're like, well, I can excuse it because it's everything else is working so well. But that is it. Yeah, you're moving your character around. You're picking up cards. You're placing them on enemies, basically. If you have extra points left over, you can rest and heal or do whatever. And then every so often, you have to roll the dice.
Yes.
It's so infrequent that I kind of wish it was used more. But again, I don't know how often it's used in D&D.
A lot. Yeah.
So you're tasked with doing certain things, and you're able to see what ability you need to do those things. And if your character has, say, 2 finesse points or 2 finesse stars, and then you go over to this thing that needs 5 finesse stars, well, you don't have enough stars, so you got to roll the dice, and you really, really, really hope that you get the extra stars you need to finish that task. Otherwise, you have to wait a whole nother round to roll the dice again. And meanwhile, characters are attacking you, you're under fire, all sorts of bad things are happening. And so the roll of the dice can literally determine the outcome of that battle in a second.
And that's what people find appealing or terrible about tabletop RPG games is you have, you try to craft a character that has these stats and these modifiers. So when you roll, you roll your D6 and you roll the 3, oh, well, I have a +2 for this kind of thing. So now I get 5 and now I get to win. In Dungeons and Dragons, like a classic example is, oh, here's like this crevasse here and I think I can jump it. Well, DM has a number that you have to beat. Like, okay, I know as DM that they have to roll an 8 or higher to make it. Okay. And you've got, +3 modifier on, we use their terms on finesse. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I roll an 8, I get a +3, oh, I beat it. But if I didn't, then you may have heard this term, a saving throw. Okay, so.
I know nothing.
Yeah, so, let's say you miss the first throw, then you get a chance to do a saving throw, and like, oh, if you get that, you don't make the jump, but at the last minute you reach around, you grab, and you hold on to the edge. Okay. And this does, it doesn't do it as much as you would if you were playing, say, classic D&D. I mean, there would be like a lot more of it, but it does give you that flavor.
Yeah.
And I will say it does, like, it gives you the choice. There are multiple situations where you have a room full of enemies, and it's like, oh, well, you can try and wipe out all the enemies here, or you can try to spend your skill points and do other thing while you're. So you have your finesse guy, and I don't want to keep picking on that, trying to, let's say, pick a lock. And the other characters are defending him while he's trying to do that and trying to get those saving throws. And if you get it right away, awesome, you're out. But if you don't, now suddenly you're getting overwhelmed and
Yeah. Here's what I like about Table of Tales. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm rating it right now, but I want to say they were like, Brian, you've never played one of these games before. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the developers took me by the hand and walked me through it nice and easy like. Mm-hmm. And helping that out are 3 difficulty modes.
Yes.
There's basically one...
Which actually goes for their gamebook adventures too. Their gamebook adventures have exactly the same difficulty levels and the same language too.
That's perfect because that really kind of speaks to the fact that this game is pretty much for all ages. Mm-hmm. There's one mode where you basically don't even have to worry about combat. You can just sort of go through and enjoy the story. Mm-hmm. And then there's the novice one that's supposed to be, this is how the game was meant to be played. Yes. And then one that if you've already played it, hey, if you want to go through again and make some more choices and get a little bit extra challenge, that's there for you too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the actual story itself, like play through from, let's say you do it on normal mode, 2 hours, 2.5 maybe.
Oh, it took me about 3.
3, okay. Yeah. All right. But
because I died a few times. So I'm not very good at this.
And actually, what is nice for my D&D players, unlimited revives. Like if one of your characters in the party dies, you can just get next to him and revive him. And I think it's only like 2 action points too. It's super cheap because even on the normal difficulty, there are levels where unless you figure out how to beat the level, you're going to die a lot.
Yeah, no, for sure.
You get over. They really like throwing just waves of enemies at you.
Yeah. And we started off talking about the graphics, but what I didn't realize from my first playthrough, I think I was too involved in the story and too involved in like trying to figure out how to play and in the gameplay mechanics. But today I was capturing some footage, and I was blown away by how good the soundtrack is.
Yeah,
it's just majestic and epic and just everything you want for this high seas pirate adventure.
Yeah, there is one track I joked about it because they played it while we were doing the multiplayer. There is one track that's trying desperately not to sound like the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack. It's just like, oh guys, I know what happened. You were like, all right, the due date is coming up. We got to get this thing out of here. I know this sounds a whole lot like Hans Zimmer, but we just got to get something.
And when you came over today, we did try an extra mode in the game, which is a multiplayer mode. Mm-hmm. Local only, and it's tough to say how many players it involves.
Yeah, this is one I'm going to say a pretty massive ding because they really don't explain how to set this up. There's just like a multiplayer tab. You hit that.
Yeah.
So it's basically like, all right, figure it out. You're smart.
And it's not that hard to figure out, but it certainly could have used a little bit of an explanation. So the person in VR is the villain.
Yes.
And that's one person.
As it should be.
And the people outside of VR, again, local multiplayer only, no online, are using one DualShock 4, passing the DualShock 4 around.
Yeah. If you're playing with one player, you play all 3 scoundrels.
Exactly.
If you're playing with 2 players, you guys got to sort that out. If you're playing with 3 players, each of you is one of the characters.
But the confusing part is that they force you to have, it's certainly 1v3.
Yeah.
Regardless of how many actual players you have,
Right.
it's 1v3. And so that's the confusing part. I thought we were going to go and do a game, 1v1, we couldn't start. I was like, well, I guess I'll grab this other controller over here and add another player and see how that works. And then when I did that, it turned off my other controller. I was like, this isn't working right.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point is, it sets you up in a scenario, sets you up in this dungeon, and you were the bad guy.
I was.
And I was 3 good guys. It plays basically just like a battle in the regular game.
A little bit.
Yeah. So it was kind of cool. I like what they're doing. You're able to adjust the camera angle so you can see the board in all different ways. You can get real close up.
In VR, you can actually swirl the whole table around.
I like that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. I think we should rate this up.
I think we should.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's our rating scale?
Our rating
I always
scale.
forget.
It's pretty
I ask
easy.
you every single week.
There's only 3.
It's a 3.
A 1 is yes. You absolutely have to buy this game. This is just the best of the best for the medium. If you have a PSVR, this should be in your library. A 2 is yeah, sure, why not? If it's a genre you particularly like, or if it's on a really decent sale, go ahead and pick it up. Or a 3 is no. Do not buy this game. Friends don't let friends buy crap. We need to vote with our wallets and tell developers that we deserve better. So, 1, 2, or 3? What do you think?
So, when here's the thing. I started playing this and I was like, oh, this is not for me.
Yeah.
I was like, these are little plastic figurines. I felt like I was playing with toy soldiers. And, you know, in the whole, with Arbitrix voicing the whole thing, I was like, this is going to be a long game. This is not a Brian Paul game. This is not what I was looking to do. And as it progressed, I was like, oh, I get to make this decision. Oh, I wonder what would happen if I made that other decision. And I started like getting into it. And the story for playing with these little figurines started roping me in. I was like, why do I care about these characters? They start off as scoundrels, and you start learning their backstory. And by the end of the game, again, just a mere 3 hours later, I cared about these characters to the point where I just wanted to start another game and see what would happen to them if I made other choices. And I did, and I loved it, and I couldn't believe, how much this had roped me in, especially for a genre of game that all my life it's sort of been just out of reach, just something I never really delved into. And they made it, like I said, they made it easy for me to do so. My favorite thing about Table of Tales is that it's called Table of Tales, The Crooked Crown. Because I desperately, after giving this game a 1 like I just did, because see, I snuck that in there, I want to see Table of Tales, The Dangerous Forest, or I want it, now that they've got the engine and all the components, basically they just need to swap out tiles and give us a new story, and they just, I want more. I want more. I don't need more of this story. I don't need more of The Crooked Crown, but I want more Table of Tales. I love this. This is a 1. I'm gonna be fighting for this on the next top 20 list.
Ooh,
I love this game.
Wow.
And it's one of those things that just resonates with you from a visual standpoint, from a gameplay perspective, and like you just kind of want to tell everyone to play it. And I think that's what I just did. What about you?
I will say, one thing I was kind of singing his praises most of the time. There's one thing that is definitely missing from the tabletop gaming experience. It's got the DM. It's got rolling. It's got some strategy. It's got some good storytelling. What it's missing is you putting back into the story. The best role-playing games, the best campaigns, and you guys who have done this before, you've had that one special set of friends, and it. Yes, there's the game, but it also turns into like this live action improv theater. It's like you as the players just trying as much as you can to screw with the DM's plans by coming up with crazy ideas, and there's a lot more of give and take to it. Okay. Now, it's understandable that you really can't capture that in a one player versus the computer sort of thing. But I do want to note that isn't really part of it. Yes, you get to change the story by making choices here and there, but you don't really get to, you don't get to choose exactly what your character says or how they're going to react in a certain situation. Right. You are limited. So I will, that is kind of, something that's there. I'll also say, if you're like, oh, great, this is what I've been looking for, I can't wait to play D&D on VR. It isn't as deep as that. Okay,
which is why I could play it.
Well, and exactly, and that's what I was going to say. It's not this game's. It's not its role to be that.
Yeah.
It's to do this. It's to, for someone like me who hasn't played in a while, to get me back into it, or to people who might be intimidated that by like role playing games. That no, this is what it is. This is the purest kind of like essence reduction of the tabletop gaming experience. They've simplified it enough to make it very easy to understand and play without nerfing it too much. It's really brilliantly done, and I will say, Brian, it's I think it's very likely we will see more, because that has been their business model with the game book adventures.
That's so exciting.
Most of the game book adventures, especially their newer ones, they don't ever end. Like the story goes and you get X amount for free, and then daily or weekly in some cases they have more sections of the story that you can pay for and download and kind of expand. So
it's exciting.
Giving you game X and then expanding it is definitely part of their model. So I think you have that to look forward to, and I'm going to say it's a 1.
I wasn't sure where you were going.
Yeah,
I was nervous.
Yeah, this is absolutely 1. Again, if you're looking for a super deep, like, oh man, I can't wait to do like a 30-hour campaign, it's not quite that, but there is a lot of replayability. It is a lot of fun. It reminds me, going back to my Engage days, of Rifts. There was a Rifts game for Engage, and it was a lot of the same thing. So yeah, it definitely scratches that itch. I went into it completely cold. I knew the name of the game.
Yeah.
That was it. And I fired it up and like, oh, I'm going to play a tabletop game in VR. Why am I doing this in VR?
Damn you, Brian. Why did you make me do this?
Yeah, and I was thinking, like, No Heroes Allowed just came screaming to my head. I'm like, oh, that was not pleasant, and I don't want to do this again. And I was so wrong. It is beautiful. It's charming. The gameplay makes me very nostalgic in a good way. And yeah, it's great. Pick it up.
That's it. So as always... What?
I was going to say, and not only that, like, this is one of the ones I'm going to recommend picking it up at full price, because it's a developer. I really want to make sure they succeed, and I want to see more. So,
yeah, we always take the side of the consumer, but on as far as this game's concerned, you get your money's worth for $20. I've seen a lot of $20 games recently that don't deliver, that don't give you content, don't give you gameplay.
$40 games,
and this gives you everything. I would have paid $30, but don't tell the developers, because then they might charge $30 for the Dangerous Forest. Who knows? Right. It's very, very possible. As always, we want to know what you thought of Table of Tales. Hopefully you loved it. If you didn't, whether you did or didn't, let us know in the comments. Always curious to know if somebody just totally disagrees with us. I love to hear those things.
I can see you disagreeing with, like, this is my kind of game, but I can't see you saying this was a badly made game.
Very true. Yeah. We'll see what happens. People are constantly surprising me.
It's true.
Also, what are the games you want us to play? The list is long. It gets longer every single week. I kid you not. It's ridiculous. I mean, the list doesn't fit in this room anymore. I barely fit in
PSVR is dead. There's no good games for it.
For real. It's crazy. For an episode of Why We Love PlayStation VR, I'm Brian Paul.
I'm Des.
And we'll see you next week.